the Iowa football schedule is set. We're trying to start to figure out some kick times. Kirk Ferentz said last week Iowa's going to be playing a Friday game. And no, not just that Black Friday game against Nebraska. When is Cyhawk going to be played? We break it down. Plus, Scott Dochterman joins us from Media Day over in L.A. All coming up today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Well, as we get ready for the football season, yes, we are still months away from it, but we are inside of triple digits now, inside of 100 days until the kickoff of the 2024 college football season. Iowa will get things started in week 1 against Illinois State. And then, of course, the big in-state rivalry matchup against Iowa State in week number 2. Speculation is bounding right now as we are getting closer and closer to finding out when exactly these games are going to be played. And a little nugget last week as Kirk Ferentz was in West Des Moines for his annual stopover during the Cold Chicken Tour as they made their way around the iClub circuit and made their way to West Des Moines, and a full house. It was great to see that. A lot of excitement, obviously, building. Lisa Bluter also made an appearance there, which came as a surprise to a lot of people because the day previous she had announced her retirement. But heard a lot of good things from the event. I was over in Iowa City at an event of my own, but heard some good things and some nuggets that always come out of those. And one of the biggest, I thought, was Coach Ferentz mentioning that the potential and the likelihood that they're going to be playing another Friday night game this season, not just the Black Friday game against Nebraska, which has become tradition now since them joining the Big Ten and putting that at the end of the season. It's something that, frankly, I think is a good thing for Iowa football, getting that national spotlight. It's also helped that Iowa has been the plus side of this rivalry as of late and have had so many of those games go their way throughout the year. So you got that component to it. But you'd look through the schedule. All right, Black Friday against Nebraska. Sure, makes sense. It's going to be there. It's always going to be there. And this year, game back in Iowa City, and one that very well could decide a lot in terms of not just the potential for these teams making their way into and moving up the pecking order, if you will, for bowl games, because I do believe both these teams are going to be bowl teams this season. It could mean a little bit more for Iowa. You go through the schedule, and something we've talked about in the past throughout this spring, this is as advantageous of a schedule as you're going to find in the Big Ten. Yes, you have to go to Ohio State. That's going to be incredibly difficult, but you're going to draw somebody good. You're going to draw the best of the best, and that is the Buckeyes in my mind this season. However, even if you play them in Kinnick, I don't think Iowa's beating this Ohio State team, at least the way that they look on paper, what they did in the transfer portal. If they can figure out that offensive line and exactly what they're going to do at the quarterback position, I think that's going to be a whole lot about this team that's going to be contending for a national championship. Is it Will Howard? Is it one of the guys that have been around for a while? What direction do they go there? Because all the other parts, that defense is elite and a whole lot more. So, yes, that is an incredibly difficult matchup. But the rest of the Big Ten slate, in fact, the week before, or the game before, I should say, they take on Minnesota. They go up to Minnesota, revenge on their mind. This Minnesota team, the odds makers do not have a whole lot of hope for Minnesota at this point in time. You kind of look through at the numbers that are out there right now in terms of win totals, and certainly one of the lowest that we've seen in a long time for Phil Flex squad up in Minnesota. That's a matchup. Then you get the bye week going into that matchup against Ohio State. After that, you come home for Washington. Washington, some of the lowest numbers of returning starters in all of college football. Yes, they played for the national championship a year ago, but what this Washington team is going to be, Kalen DeBoer now getting his mail, obviously in Tuscaloosa, just a lot of change there. And it's going to be, I think, a level up, if you will, a step up for them and a change going into the Big Ten. I think Iowa's certainly the favorite in that game. After that, it's a road trip to Michigan State. home for Northwestern and Wisconsin after that. Then the road trips back-to-back, UCLA, Maryland, and finishing up Black Friday against Nebraska. So when you're looking at this schedule, what are the games that make the most sense for a Friday night matchup? What would make the most sense? I think there's two that probably make the most sense. First of all, mentioning Ohio State. Ohio State has made it known in no uncertain terms they will not play Friday home games in Columbus. They won't do it. Iowa has used the excuse, and it's a very good one, with the hospital there and parking, how difficult it is to pull something like that off. They said they'd be willing to do it on Labor Day weekend. Luckily, that hasn't come to fruition. I hate Friday night games. I work Friday nights. I'm calling high school football here across the state, and because of that, I despise them. But I know the way that things are done anymore. It's about TV, and TV dictates what's going to be done. So let's cross that one off. Now, the potential Minnesota. They played there a few years ago. That was the infamous leave the timeouts and take the pig moment from Kirk Ferentz, rubbing it in a little bit against PJ Fleck. Oh, that was so good. I'd love to have another opportunity for that. That could be a possibility for Iowa. That would be on September 20th. That game then would be played on a Friday night if they go that direction. Some other potential games at Michigan State. Again, a potential one. Iowa would have played at home the week before. That's a potential. But I think the ones that make the most sense are the last two road games of the year. First, the trip out to UCLA. Much easier to put them in a late window. And you're trying to find new TV windows. You put that as a 9 o'clock central kickoff on like an FS1, something like that. If they have a doubleheader of football, one starts at 6. This one, well, probably more like 9:30 before it gets going. I know a lot of people already making plans to go out there. Let's see, because it sounds like this news is potentially going to come out this week. If it is UCLA, might have to be changing around your travel plans just a little bit in order for that to happen. And then the following game against Maryland. Iowa will be coming off a bye week. They do have a bye week after that game against UCLA at the Rose Bowl that is scheduled right now for November 9th. With a bye week there, don't have to worry about the quick turnaround. And then Iowa on top of it would also get a full week to prepare for the matchup against Nebraska, something that they obviously don't always have, playing Saturday and then coming back on Friday on a short week. So I guess if everything goes according to the way that we would want it, I think the Maryland game would be the one that makes the most sense. Rest component coming off of what they have with the bye week after the UCLA game. I think that's one that you potentially certainly would be circling. But we should find out here pretty soon. This is the time, late May, that normally we start to get these schedules. We get to find out a little bit more about exactly what it's going to look like as it pertains to the TV schedule. The other note on Cyhawk. So week 2, scheduled for September 7th for that one. Couple of Big Ten games have already been announced in week 2. The first one, the big one, Texas going to Michigan. How about that matchup? A potential top 10 matchup early in the season with the Wolverines, the defending national champion. Texas comes to town with Quentin Ewers and company. A lot of returning talent on that Longhorn team, and a lot of buzz about Texas in their first year in the SEC. That has already been designated as the big noon kickoff. It'll be 11 o'clock Central Time on Big Fox. They will have that one. The other game also scheduled already in week 2 is the Colorado-Nebraska game. That game being played in Lincoln this season. That'll be the NBC game. 6:30 kickoff for that one. So when you're looking around, obviously the biggest window still remaining would be the 2:30 kickoff on CBS. That would be what you're looking at. Some other good games that weekend in the Big Ten. You have an all Big Ten matchup with Michigan State and Maryland. Neither of those teams anticipated to be great, certainly, of this season. Another one to keep an eye on potentially would be Boise State at Oregon. Fan base of Boise. What kind of generation are you going to get out of eyeballs? Now, Oregon, likely a preseason top 5 team. So that could certainly drive some viewership there. Kansas goes to Illinois, and on the surface, Kansas, a lot of people's top 25 in the preseason. 2 teams from the power structure, potential there. But those are who you're kind of fighting with right now. That 2:30 window, which would be great. 2:30 kickoffs for me are absolutely perfect. You still got your evening, got a chance to get back, watch the late games if you're making your way back from Iowa City. So you have all that. That's my hope. Is that what we're going to get? And we'll get that 2:30 kickoff with Cyhawk coming up this season. Well, Scott Dochterman, he is in Los Angeles right now as there are Big Ten meetings happening. We'll talk with Doc a little bit about what's going on there, break things down, and get you ready for the Big Ten baseball tournament right around the corner. Iowa's qualified as the number 5 seed. What's the path for Iowa baseball? But coming up next, we talk with Doc. Scott Dochterman joins us. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I'm a small business owner. It is incredibly difficult to find those right people. And with LinkedIn Jobs, it makes it so simple. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, you might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Los Angeles, Big Ten meetings in LA as the footprint for the Big Ten has expanded to the West. Scott Dochterman is there. Doc, Trent and Ken, thank you for coming on, Doc. How are you and what are you attending here that takes you to Los Angeles?
Well, it's the Big Ten meetings this week through Wednesday, and so there's a lot to discuss here. As you probably know, the House case, the settlement is in kind of prime position for that to happen. Plus, there's all kinds of issues regarding travel and whether it's TV, how things are going to get set up in the future and stuff. So this is at this resort here. It's the first time I can remember they have the men's basketball, women's basketball, and football coaches all here, go along with all the administrators. So there's a lot going on, and they haven't quite started yet, but they'll start this afternoon.
So as we talk about the House case, I mean, what are you unearthing? What are you kind of waiting for? And an opportunity to talk to these people. We know it's huge, and the impact is going to be immense when it comes down. What's kind of the latest on that front, and how close we are to getting some kind of settlement?
It appears that the votes will happen on Thursday as to whether or not this goes through. You're looking at $2.7 billion settlement, and this will come kind of in parcel where about 40% of it or so will come from the NCAA itself. The remaining like $1.6 billion will come from future revenues from the NCAA tournament. Which is where NCAA primarily gets its revenue. So it means every school will lose money not lose money, but make less money, I guess, on the NCAA tournament. And it doesn't damage these schools nearly as much as it will, say, the group of 5 teams, a Draker in Northern Iowa, where, if you take, $100,000 out of their budget, that's huge. So there's that. There's also the opportunity and probability that schools will be able to pay for student athletes up to $20 million per year. The split right now, it appears to be based on percentage of female and male athletes. So if it's 52% female, 52% of that money will go to female athletes. So it's a very complicated case. I don't know that I could go too far in depth and detail on a lot of the other topics, but it is vastly important. Is big. I think this is probably even bigger in the big picture as what we saw with 3 years ago with NIL and the Alston case.
Doc, Tony Petitti had been on the job I think essentially about a year now, right? I think it was middle of May last year they got. Well, how would you, not great, but some of the highlights of Petivi's first year as Big Ten commissioner? How do you think it's gone?
Oh, wow. Well, it's certainly been impactful. Let's put it that way. I mean, when you look at everything that has changed, I mean, being able to get, Washington, Oregon, going with what's going on here. I mean, he's basically hopped on the treadmill at 12 and hasn't really slowed down over the course of this year. I mean, the TV contracts were finalized. So there's a lot, in this league, and then trying to figure it out, whether it's, non-divisional play in football, figure out travel. That's going to be a major factor here this week. And so, yeah, I mean, it's hard to give him a grade, but I'll say that his short reign thus far has been one of the most impactful that I've ever seen.
So our first opportunity to talk to you, Doc, since the surprise announcement a week ago in the afternoon. Lisa Bluter is retiring, and very quickly, 23 minutes later, Jan Jensen has been named the head coach. Something that came together very quickly for Beth Getz, though. She had a little more thought time than just a press release that we saw there. Take us in a little bit, your thoughts on the retirement, Jan getting the job, and the job that Beth Getz did in order to make this happen very quickly.
Yeah, it happened it came together very quickly, and it's funny you bring that up because when I was actually talking to Jan Jensen here when you called, this was something that she had to be prepared for, but also, happened very quickly, and that was, you've got to look big picture at Iowa. Is Jan the best fit, or you could probably get all the maybe 10, 15 or so coaches in the country that would be interested in coming to Iowa. So she had to really hone in on that. I mean, it looks like a no-brainer to elevate Jan, but you've got to do your due diligence. And so when Lisa mentioned that, then she had to figure it out very quickly. You also it was a dead period, so they had to wait on Lisa's announcement because you didn't want to leave the recruits stranded, because then they'd have a lot of questions and you can't talk to them. So they had to be very strategic, because can you imagine if that would have happened, say, a week ago, Thursday, and then you had to wait till Monday to contact them? That would have been tough on them and their families, and you probably have to try to go through a third party. But even then, they're going to then that everybody's going to be gunning for them. That maybe they're not allowed to talk, but some coach might call their high school coach and say, "Oh, by the way, So there's a lot there, and but I think Beth handled it about as well as he possibly could, and here we are.
Scott Dochterman from The Athletic is our guest. Doc, do you know I'm Pat Fitzgerald? If he was still at Northwestern, would his kid be playing for him, or was he looking to get out from Dad's shadow? Do you know?
I don't know, but I would. My guess is he would probably play for him as a walk-on. It is interesting. Drew McPherson, who also goes to Loyola, and his dad was an associate head coach for Fitz, and now Fitz's son, and they're both going to Iowa. And I was there when they visited last year. I guess it was the Michigan State game, and it was kind of a surprise to see Pat on the sideline. But overall, it was they have the one thing with Pat Fitzgerald and with Kirk, they have great respect for one another. So I think that's apparent. And so, Brian Fitzgerald will come on as a walk-on. Of course, if he does get a few more offers, Power 5 offers, then maybe that will change. But Ryan was certainly wanting to come to Iowa, and from what I was told by somebody very close to Fitz, and then also Iowa was really interested in getting him in the program as a walk-on.
Well, I mean, there's a billion analysts out there in college football. I mean, can't Kirk find a spot maybe for him? Cool his heels a little bit and come in? They don't need a ton of help on the defensive side of the football, but getting him in the building wouldn't be a bad thing, right?
I wouldn't do it right now. I mean, not until after this case is settled. I think you really want to make sure that there's been enough issues around all the programs. You just want to avoid that. Now, if he comes back and he's considered, he did nothing and was found not guilty, but not liable for any of that, then sure, but he probably will have some other offers as it goes.
I would think so. Scott Dochterman, Doc, so you'll be there covering it for the 3 days. What can we look forward to as far as subscribers to The Athletic? What are you planning on doing?
Well, I'm going to really just try to hone in on what happens here. I mean, I have a lot of questions about the Big Ten moving forward. I mean, how are they going to manage this? I mean, being on both coasts, how are they going to handle travel? How are they going to handle being a new league with 4 main brands coming into it, and everything from tiebreakers in football to what may be the future of championship games and location. So I think there's a lot here, and and there's probably a lot that I haven't even thought about that'll happen.
Good stuff. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Doc, thank you. Have a safe trip home. Enjoy your stay out in the West Coast, and we'll talk to you in a week. Thank you, Scott Dochterman.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
See you, buddy. Scott Dochterman, as he joins us from the Big Ten meetings that are taking place.
Thanks, as always, to Scott Dochterman for joining us. Great information from him, and should be a lot of news making its way through the Big Ten landscape. A lot of changes continue on the horizon. Coming up this week, it's the Big Ten baseball tournament. Iowa has qualified, but the schedule makers did the Hawkeyes no favors. We'll talk a little bit about that, wrap things up, and get you set for Omaha and the Big Ten baseball tournament. That's as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, futures, and a whole lot more. The betting menu is immense at FanDuel. Odds on whatever you can imagine, they have them there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, maybe you're a Timberwolves fan. You're looking ahead. T-Wolves to win the series, -170. You want to go the other way with the Dallas Mavericks and the other Luka, not Luka Garza, that other guy. They're +150. So many great things on the FanDuel app. FanDuel.com. Take a look at the odds and find exactly what you can find with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So here we are on the Big Ten tournament. And though this Iowa baseball season has been a disappointing one, certainly for the Iowa baseball program, preseason top 20, and have not come close to those heights. There's been frustrations really up and down this team. So many different angles. Early on in the season, it was the bullpen issues, not being able to find the right guys at the right opportunity. And though the bullpen certainly improved throughout the course of the year, it was not at the level that we thought, I think, it was coming into the season. The starting rotation had a set of issues. Brody Brecht was struggling with a lot of different things early on in the season and has really turned it around here over the last month plus, and we're seeing the best of Brody Brecht. But it also went awry his last start on Thursday night here in Des Moines at Principal Park in that game against Florida International. We knew Brecht wasn't going to throw a ton in that game, but struggle with his command is something that we see certainly from time to time with him. Cade Obermueller, the way that he has stepped up this year and been maybe the most consistent of the starting pitching, as frustrating at times as Brecht's season has been, Marcus Morgan has been just absolutely terrible. And it's been an awful year for him. The injuries that have been sustained to the offense, that's been a big part of it this season. It's just been a year that has not gone according to plan. And not only that, but remember Iowa baseball, Rick Heller had put a ton of work into the fundraising for rebuilding, if you will, Dwayne Banks Field and putting in everything to make it up to code for a Big Ten baseball stadium. It looked like the funding was there. And then that was pulled away as some of the financing that was looked to be delivered by some investor here from Des Moines fell through. Guy didn't have the money. And with it, now they're back to the drawing board on that one. So there's just been so many hiccups that have happened in this baseball season. You know, a coach at a non-revenue sport like baseball at a place like Iowa, you have to wear a lot of hats. Speaking of what we talked about earlier with LinkedIn, that's Rick Heller. He has to do so much. And to have that and feel like you have things close to the finish line at minimum for the rebuild of Dwayne Banks Field, and then have that pulled out. I mean, that frustration coupled with the way the season has gone has been there. But now Iowa gets ready for their first matchup. Now, the schedule is not great for Iowa. So they'll be the only team, well, them in Michigan, that will not get to play on the opening day on Tuesday. They have to wait until Wednesday to play their quarterfinal round matchup against the Wolverines. So they play at 2 o'clock. That means that their schedule is compressed even more. That means more taxing on your bullpen. Iowa has to win the Big Ten tournament to be an NCAA tournament team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There is no path for this team to get in as an at-large team with what their record and their RPI is at this point in time. It's just not going to happen. So you have to do it. And then obviously the easiest way to do it is winning that opening game. You lose your first game of the Big Ten tournament, coming back and even getting to a championship game, it's just so incredibly difficult. So they're in the 4-5 matchup. Michigan won the season series. Both these teams tied with 14-10 records in the Big Ten this year. Michigan gets to be the home team as the higher seed, as they won the series earlier this season in Iowa City, 2-1. Illinois, the top seed, is also on their side of the bracket. The 8th seed Penn State is the other one. They will play the late game, Illinois and Penn State will, on Tuesday night. It'll get started on Tuesday morning. The Battle of Indiana, it'll be the Hoosiers against the Boilermakers, followed up by Nebraska, Ohio State. That'll be 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. If Iowa wins their first matchup against Michigan, they will come back then the next day on the 23rd, play at 6 o'clock against the winner of Illinois, Penn State, likely the top seeded Illini in that one. If they lose, though, they will drop down and they will play then at 10 a.m., a quick turnaround again into the 23rd. The morning of the 23rd is when they will play in that one. And then that means winning 1, 2, 3, 4 games in a row to get to the Big Ten championship game if they would fall early on. The path is incredibly difficult. Brecht's going to get the ball in game now 1. The other component, speaking of Brody Brecht and getting him out there, if they would have been able to play on Tuesday, if the schedule would have went their way or tiebreakers would have went their way, whatever it was, even got another win in there at some point, Brody Brecht wasn't going to be able to come back and pitch in a championship game and give you 110 pitches, but he could probably give you a couple innings. And that likely is completely off the board now if that does play out. And that's another disappointing way this went. They did in the past try to play 4 games on that first day. Well, we had games that were ending. Was it Iowa, Indiana one year? I can't remember who it was against. That thing went late into the night. And then you turn around the next day and you got to play again. So they decided to move off of that. Don't love it because it hurts the Hawkeyes in this instance, but it's the reality, and that's what it is. Baseball coming up, and we get ready for the offseason of most everything right around the corner, putting a cap on all the spring sports, and then it'll be a lead up into football season. We got you covered every day here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day on your TV? Do you have to turn down the volume because of all of that shouting? It's time to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube, or you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got you covered on the Hawkeyes. More coming your way this week. It is a busy one. Baseball and a whole lot more. Recruiting season right around the corner. And a couple of big camps coming up for Iowa as we're going to see more and more official visits on the football side of things make their way to Iowa City. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.